What I'm going to do is I'm going to say a little bit about esoteric astrology and general astrology, just to start us off. And then I'm going to say a little bit about Alice Bailey, but then move on to look at some more Rosic. I'll say a bit more about the 7 rays and how they relate to tarot cards, and then how the tarot cards relate to the horoscope as a means of interpretation. What I'm doing, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I'm using my own horoscope as the example for this, basically. So if I'm saying anything, the only person who'll get offended is me. Because if I started working on somebody else's horoscope, there may be something that I'm saying that they don't like. Now, to begin with, there's 2 things. There's 2 kinds of horoscopes, 2 ways of doing a horoscope. There's what we call the tropical way, which is what this one is. And then there's also the sidereal way. And they are slightly different from each other. When we get as far as looking at horoscope interpretation, I'm going to do my horoscope using the sidereal one, because that is the methodology that was used by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is the group I trained with. So I'm quite heavily influenced by their ideas. And Francis King, in his book, Ritual Magic in England, described the way that the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn did their horoscope. And I'm going to be following that. So this is a tropical horoscope, the normal one. It means a calendar-based horoscope. And you can see there that my rising sign, I'm just indicating it, the ascendant, is Aquarius. I've got the sun in the 21st degree of Pisces, and the moon in the 14th degree of Scorpio. I'll be focusing, when I do the interpretation, on the symbols for the sun and the moon using the tarot cards, just to give 2 examples. If I went on to do the entire horoscope, we'd be here for a couple of days and everybody'd be totally confused by the end of it. So I'm just going to do it using 2 examples. Now, in this horoscope chart, I've included these, which is an extension of the planetary rulers. There's a different planetary ruler for each 5 degrees of the horoscope, according to this. That's the Quinence method, which this particular one comes from the temple at Dendra in Egypt, and some astrologers use it. You can see that there's 4 sections to each of the signs of 30 degrees, so 5 degrees each. This one is the sidereal horoscope, and you will see that not everything is the same. First of all, the positions of the planets are the same, but the signs have shifted slightly. And I've also changed the house system into an equal house system of 12 equal signs, based on the mark of the ascendant repeats going round. And this time I'm using the porphyry system of 3 planetary rulers to assign the 3 decanates. And the planetary rulers are used to extend our understanding of the influences involved in a particular position by just refining it. And this is an important thing as far as I'm concerned in my definition of astrology, because I think the way astrology works is that every moment of time since the beginning of the creation of the cosmos, which some people call the Big Bang, has its own particular significance. And so the time when a human being technically takes its first breath, or a new house is bought, or whatever item we're dealing with, the particular time has a particular moment. I should also just mention, when we're talking about particular times, I'm taking my time of birth. I know I was born in King's College Hospital in Camberwell in London, although I can't remember that. I did go back there subsequently, but I don't remember being born. But I do remember some years later going through a drawer and finding my father's diary for the year 1955. And on the 13th of March, he had written in Martin Finian Grant, born 5:20 a.m. And so that's what I'm taking the structure for my time of birth and this horoscope from. So that's just a few basic points. I'll come back to this a little bit later on as we go through it in a little bit more detail. This is from the book Esoteric Astrology. I just want to make some simple comparison extracts from Alice Bailey. Ted is the great expert on Alice Bailey and astrology, not me. But I must admit, I have come to realize there is a fair bit of stuff of value to be found in there as I begin to work through her treatise of the 7 rays very, very slowly. First thing I want to look at is some of her ideas on where she quotes Blavatsky, which is included in the book Esoteric Astrology, part of the treatise on the 7 rays. Let me just see if I can tilt this so that I can read it. 7 chief planets. I'll just leave that up for a minute so that you can just glance at it. What it really shows us is that there is an overlap, something of an overlap, between what Blavatsky says in The Secret Doctrine, what Blavatsky's teachers are saying in The Secret Doctrine, and what Alice Bailey also teaches. And it's quite, some of that is quite interesting. Let people have a chance to glance at it, and then we'll move on to the next bit. She says that there are astrological relationships between the planets and the signs of the zodiac, and also the rays. And there's a tabulation.
I should say that the bottom border is cut off.
Yeah, it's more or less all there, because it ends with it's talking about the will aspect is largely unexpressed. It doesn't really say any more. There are only a couple of footnotes on that particular chart. And then the other one is the unorthodox or esoteric relationship for those people who are connected with the path. And she says the progress is from Aries through Pisces, by way of Taurus, etc. And she gives links to the rays. The note at the bottom says, in connection with the disciples and zodiac signs, Gemini and Libra are two constellations which, although their rulers express the fifth and seventh ray energy, for some occult reason they remain unrelated by any other type of sign. Notice that in this particular case she does mention the first ray, whereas before she didn't. Bit more information. She's very interested in paralleling it with the experience of the Christ. And this is something that I'm not 100% in total agreement with. She was writing at a period when non-Christian thinking was just unthinkable. And so she tended to make relationships with Christian esotericism. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I do think that it may be a little bit overemphasized. I'm also not sure about her thinking that the first initiation is the seventh ray. I'm not quite sure that that's 100% right, but that's a personal opinion. She's tending to write for and speak for a group of people that are not specifically initiated into any tradition. Having taken initiations in a temple myself in the Rosicrucian tradition, I'm tending to look at things a little bit differently. She then shows it another way, relating the planets and the rays. This is a little bit tricky because she talks about these hidden planets. And as far as I've seen it, she doesn't fully explain what they are. If I'm doing astrology, I like something that's fairly comprehensive so that I can see what I'm talking about and look it up and sort of cross-feed it with my chart. What I find looking at esoteric astrology is she says a lot about certain signs and planets and not much about others. So what I'm thinking is not always helpful, but still interesting. She's also got this thing about sacred and non-sacred planets. I find that a little bit confusing. I think she's talking about her own understanding of the sort of global initiatory system, that some are more advanced than others. But I think the term sacred planet is a little bit unfortunate because the two planets that are the most worshipped, and in that sense sacred, were the sun and the moon. And she's not thinking about them as sacred planets at all, which to me is, I think, a little bit confusing. And that's just a personal view. Finally, she's got this diagram where everything starts with the monad, slowly comes through the various constellations, through the chakras, all the way down to the physical man or woman, come to that. I do think that this idea of an energy transfer from divinity by means of planets into us as human beings, macrocosm and microcosm, if you like, is a useful concept. That's just a little bit from Alice Bailey to set the stage. And I want to look at tarot and the seven rays. It must be over 10 years ago now, Ted, that you and I did the seven ray session at my first summer school. And one of the things I did when I went there was I want to know something about this 7 rays stuff that theosophists are always going on about. And absolutely fascinating. I thought it was really valuable. But at one of these seminars, it just hit me that the 7 rays and the first numbered 7 tarot cards are saying exactly the same thing. It's 2 different traditions, one Eastern esoteric and one Western esoteric, talking the same language, talking the same truth. And I just did a bit of work on this just to show you how they correlate. So this is the first tarot card. I'm using the numbered ones. I know there's a 0, but this isn't in this scheme. I'm actually using the tarot cards designed originally for the temple I was in by my old friend Harry Wendrich, the artist. And it was under the guidance of Nick Farrell, the esotericist who was leading our temple at that time. And so these tarot cards represent real people. And you can see, I can see straight away here that there is such a similarity between the symbolism here, although some of it is quite detailed, and the meaning here, which some of you will have come across from Ted's lectures. He very graciously allowed me to use this bit of a slide. Here you've got a magician, and what he's doing is he's synthesizing, there's a hexagram to show that, these elements of air, earth, fire, and water on his altar. Using power, he's got inspiration from the goddess there. He's got other energies. These are the same energies as the horoscope expressed in color on the bands of his wand. And so on. It's talking about the same thing. What the magician is doing is synthesizing, creating, maintaining, necessarily sometimes destroying, including the negative things in his own psyche, and focusing. So there's your first ray. When we move to the second ray, what we have is the High Priestess. I should have said the first ray, I'll just go back. As it says there, indicates the planet Mercury in astrology. The second ray is the High Priestess. Love, wisdom, attraction, inclusiveness, all embracing, mercy, empathy, the spiritual side of the feminine, symbolized by the moon. Holding a chalice because of all the business about watery and magnetic elements. The staff there has a particular meaning of balance and harmony. Third ray is the much more maternal aspect of the female as divided from the spiritual. And so you've got all the produce of the earth, all this greenery, animals, all these wonderful things. And the symbol is Venus. And if you notice on both the High Priestess and the Empress. The color system, blue and green respectively, corresponds exactly, because the Rosicrucians are very interested in illustrating energy through color. Move on to the fourth one, the Emperor, the sign Aries. It's an interesting one. Discrimination, courage, hope, creative living, art of harmony through conflict. The thing that I always remember when I look at this one is the warrior, there he is. I remember the samurai, because they were also great poets and great painters. And they were able to bring those two forces into a very harmonious balance. As I've studied the seven rays more and more, I've come to realize that I've got quite a lot of fourth ray influence flowing through me. And it's funny how these ideas jump out at you. You take the name by which I'm best known, Finian, it actually translates from the old Irish as warrior. It can't be much clearer than that. But there it is. Moving on to the fifth ray. This is an interesting one. The Hierophant. The image here is of William Wynne Westcott, who was a close confidant of Madame Blavatsky and a member of Madame Blavatsky's inner circle, as well as being a top eminent Freemason and Rosicrucian. He was one of the founders of the Golden Dawn movement. Unlike some of the others who disagreed with Madame Blavatsky, he rode both horses at the same time and was one of the people that wrote a eulogy on her death in 1891. He remained at the top of the innermost circle of her friends and theosophists throughout her life. The symbolism here is Taurus. These are the letter Vov, which literally means nail, and it's everything that joins things together. You've got symbols of harmony and symbols of power. This one is, in many senses, spiritual, but it's also got the scientific element. The Rosicrucians would talk about spiritual science, perhaps, but they're just as interested in the harder, more traditional sciences as the theosophists are. There's quite a considerable overlap there, and their understanding of things is quite wide. You've got symbols of the elements, symbols of harmony, and of course the symbol of the bull, sign for Taurus on his chair. There's also the checkered floor of the lodge down the bottom here, like a chessboard pattern. The color on this one is a bit more red than on the understanding of the fifth ray, but I think close enough. They're not wildly different. Sixth one is interesting because the Golden Dawn documents differentiated from the well-known Rider-Waite. They're using the story of Perseus and Andromeda, which is what you see here. But the meaning, which in a couple of words is making choices, is and making the right choices, overcoming evil, etc., is exactly the same. And I think it's interesting that, again, you've got blue and other colors, a double symbolism in color, because you've got, of course, the two pillars for the sign of Gemini. And interesting enough, the Hebrew letter over here is Zain, which is a sword, and he's got a sword in his hand. So the symbolism is all there. Overcoming the lower self, not allowing the lower self to take control, liberating and ultimately finding unity between the polarity of male and female is all in there. And that's the sixth ray. Of course, there's devotion and there's a lot of idealism there as well. Interestingly, I think deliberately, the Golden Dawn people used a non-Christian symbol for what are often taken as Christian ideas. But these things are universal. Seventh ray is an interesting one. It's basically similar to the first one. The charioteer is in control of all the energies of the seven rays. That's a symbol from Mithraism, if you like. And if you notice, you've got a polarity between a white snake on the black horse's head, a black snake on the white horse's head. This one differs from the Rider-Waite pattern in that the Rider-Waite pattern, it's two sphinxes. And when I first came across that, what I was thinking about is the symbolism is probably something of a carnival float, which makes a lot more sense in ritualistic terms, because great carved marble sphinxes are not going to pull anything. But this version is more concerned directly with energy. And the other meaning of this card is victory as well. So there I think you have got a summation in pictorial form of the seven energies of the seven rays. And there's more, because it then hit me, there are the ones we just looked at across the top. I was thinking about what about the rest of them? And it came to me that what we have along here, I'm not going to say any more about them than this, is a series of virtues. And what we have along here is a series of cosmic events. Now, the interesting thing is, if you read them downwards, you can see a relationship. Because the magician, his virtue is strength or power. And the ultimate thing that he's able to do is to discern between good and evil and overcome evil in place of good. And that's a cosmic event when we're able to do that, to overcome evil. So all of these, in their own way, I think they relate to Ray 1, the virtue and the consequence. Likewise with Ray 2, the other name for the hermit is prudence and following the light. And this one, the cosmic tower, is all to do with the energy of the temple. And it's actually being liberated from things. It's not necessarily being destroyed, but the old things we don't need get destroyed and the person becomes liberated. Number 3, the earthy Venusian energy. The wheel is, this one is drawn up rather like a horoscope on purpose, is to do with the positive experiences of karma, is the way I would express that, in its virtuous sense. It's part of nature. And then we get the star, his meaning is hope. With the emperor, you get justice, because that's hopefully what the warrior is interested in. And then you get the moon, whose basic meaning is evolution. The Hierophant The virtue is sacrifice, and the cosmic event is solar energy. The lovers, as we said, is choices. The virtue is transformation, symbolized by death. And the end product is initiation and resurrection. And finally, the seventh one, victory. The virtue is temperance or fortitude. And the cosmic event is the understanding of the universe. I just thought those are interesting. I hadn't read them anywhere. It just came to me that I think there is that relationship. Now I'm going to talk about some astrological ideas involving Kabbalistic ideas to do with interpreting charts. Now, the wonderful thing about the tarot cards is that you can shuffle them. So you can put them in any order and they can have multiple levels of meaning. And so I'm going to use some of the levels of meaning I've mentioned so far and some others that I haven't as we go through. Quick recap. I said we would come back to this. This is the tropical chart that we mentioned. And next to it for the eagle-eyed, and this is the one I'll be focusing on, is a sidereal chart. What we're interested in here is that the planetary energies are aligned with their star groups in the heavens, so that there's an energy flow. In practical terms, these two things, the sidereal chart and the tropical chart, tend to come together in the real world. They sort of interlock with each other and stand behind in the shadows. I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. It's not a question of right or wrong. It's another way of looking. Using the cards then for interpretation. There's the tropical chart. There's the sidereal chart. It's just the way that I did this on Solar Fire. For reasons best known to itself, Solar Fire always puts the moon first in a listing. What I can tell you is that, to put it very simply, it's there, but I'm not sure it's clear enough. A sidereal chart, my sidereal chart, is 23 degrees behind my tropical chart. A sidereal chart is moving all the time because of the continuing movement of the precession of the equinoxes. And so, for example, when I come on to it, when the Golden Dawn was doing it, they said that let us put the beginning of Leo in line with the star Regulus in order to make this sidereal correction. When you look at it today, they did that in about 1888. You now look where Regulus is, it's about 3.5, but something about 4 degrees of Leo, not 1 degree. So in the 130 years since they made the calculation, it's wandered a further 3 or 4 degrees. But the sidereal charts are like that. I want to say a bit more about the decans as well, because they had their own way of doing it. 10-degree segments in the Golden Dawn tradition. And what they did, they started with Leo, which is what they called a cherubic or fixed sign. You've got the 4 holy animals mentioned in the Bible, and they're in the middle of each season. And there's 3 decans, And they did the planetary rule as a different way to the way that the other people had done it in antiquity. What they did was they took a circle and drew a 7-pointed star in it. At the top, they put the sun for Sunday, followed the line vertically down, put the moon for Monday, and so on all the way around across the chart. And then they looked at the circle they'd made and they read it off clockwise. And what they got was Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. And then it repeats itself. But because there's more than, because they were dealing with 7 planets. So it cuts across and you can see a full cycle and more there. So that takes you through the season, beginning with Leo, Virgo, and Libra. And there's one card for each 10 degrees along those. They all also had names. That's the way they did it in the book. It's better, it's clearer shown in this diagram, which is from my friend Harry's book. But he's laid this out like a horoscope. And he put the ascendant on the new year, the beginning of spring, the boundary between Pisces and Aries here. And you can see cards going round. These are the small cards, by the way, not the big cards. And the 4, to make 36, the 4 aces and the court cards are removed. Now, the interesting thing is to make this 7-planet system fit, what you've got to do is you've got to repeat one. Otherwise, it won't work. And so what they did was they repeated Mars twice. It's both the last decan of Pisces and the first decan of Aries. You've got 2 Marses. And their explanation for doing that was that it needs an extra force of spiritual energy to begin the growth of spring. So there's an extra kick of spiritual energy to get the growth going again after winter. That's what they said in their documents. If you look here, the 5 of what? Let's make sure I'm on. Yes, yes, I'm on the right one. 5, 6, 7, and so on. This is the other table that I showed you, starting it in Leo. There's Leo there. And so it goes round. Just with the astrologers who are with us, you've also got the 3 kinds of signs illustrated here. The common signs are always 2, 3, 4. They're the initiatory ones, the beginning ones. The strong ones are the holy animals, as Taurus the bull, for example, are always 5, 6, 7. The mutable signs, like Gemini here, are always 8, 9, 10. And the reason for that is the energy is weaker in these signs because it's preparing for the transition into the next sign. And so this is the growth one, this is the fullness, and this is the merging. And so it goes around. As you go around the year, they're all mixed up according to their elements. This is just a table showing us the planets and the cards. The sun is the sun. He's got a book T was their book on tarot cards. It's one of the older manuscripts. And they all had esoteric titles, which I quite like. They're good for meditation. The sun is the lord of the fire of the world. The moon is the priestess of the silver star. Mercury is the magician, the magus of power. Venus is the daughter of the mighty ones. Mars, the tower, is the lord of the hosts of the mighty. Jupiter is the wheel of fortune, the lord of the forces of life. Saturn is the universe, the great one, and the night of time. Subsequently to the Golden Dawn, they added in the other planets. Originally, the Golden Dawn didn't work with them. Uranus is the fool, the spirit of the ether. Originally, they just called it air. Neptune is the spirit of the mighty waters, or water. And Pluto is the card, the Last Judgment, the spirit of the primal fire. Likewise, when we come to the signs of the zodiac, they've all got their titles. The interesting one that is sometimes confusing is the image of the moon stands for the sign of Pisces. The others, I think, are fairly self-explanatory. Now we'll see who's still awake, because this is where it gets a little bit more tricky. I'm going back to my sidereal horoscope listed, and I'll be focusing on these two, first of all the sun, and then the moon. Right, these are just my notes when I'm working out what card goes where. The sun as a planet equals the sun in the sign of Aquarius, which means the star. The esoteric rulers, and this comes straight out of Alice Bailey, are Jupiter and Leo, which is the wheel of fortune and strength. And I've said that that particular combination is very strong. The sun is in the 28th degree. 2 and 8 is 10, so that comes out as the wheel of fortune, because there's a bit of numerology in here too. 28 is quite low down in the period of the sign, so I'm saying it's weakened, so this energy is cyclical. The court card, as mentioned on Harry's diagram, is fire of water, the king of cups. The sun is in the second house, finances, earth, and stability. This is where it gets interesting. The decan is in the third decan of Aquarius. The card is the seven of swords. The decan ruler is the moon, which equals the high priestess. And this is where the 7 business comes in. Why I said weakened is the 7s, which come under Netzach, are the weakest energies in the tree of life, Netzach and Hod, because they're the least connected to the spiritual energy of Ketha, which is the strongest. Some of the others have direct connections with Ketha, which strengthens them, like Malkuth, for instance, which is the furthest away, but it's not the weakest. Netzach doesn't have that. So what we've got is Netzach of air within the cherubic sign of air, so that's Venus, which equals the Empress, and the sign of the star we've already mentioned. Kabbalistically, each decan is 10 degrees. I'm in the 8th degree of the decan, which also stands for Hod, which is Mercury, symbolized by the magician. So if I take that and try and lay that out as tarot cards, I get a spread. And there it is. There's the sun, which is the planet we're dealing with. There's the sign it's in. There are the rulers I just mentioned. King of Cups is there. The Seven of Swords and the other rulers, there they are. Which and that's the last one, is the Decan ruler of Mercury, the 8th degree for Hod, for the position on the tree of life. Now, what I'm suggesting is this diagram representation just shows me the energies relating to alone to the sun in my chart. And possibly because of the 4th ray and 7th ray that I've got within me, I suspect that I can get a fair bit of insight if I sit down and meditate about these visual energies, because I can get more out of that than I can just looking at a whole lot of signs on a chart, because that's me. If I was more 5-ray, analytical, the sort of person that could easily make sense of railway timetables, logarithm tables, and other such like things, I might not need to bother to do it. And I fully accept that. I also know that I haven't said a thing about other things that are important in astrology, such as aspects. What I'm looking at is rulerships and the way more complex rulerships can be worked out using Kabbalistic principles. Just to show you how it works, I'll quickly give you one other one, which is my moon position. Moon is the high priestess. According to the esoteric chart, she's in Libra, which means justice. The rulers are Uranus, the Fool. I've moved it to the 21st degree because if you look, it's only 30 seconds away from the 21st degree. So it's much closer to the 21st degree than to the 20th. It's just so close. 21st degree, universe Saturn linked with the Emperor is 3, 2 and 1 is 3. Decan 3 again, so that's transition of Libra. 4 of Swords, Jupiter, rest from strife. Slightly weakened because it's the 3rd decan, but Jupiter is strong. Court card is the Prince of Cups, heir of water. And then I get the Hesed part of air, which is the Jupiter part of air. This time it's cardinal air. So you get the Wheel of Fortune. And the Kabbalistic degree is 20, which is the 1st degree. So the symbol is initiation, high level energy, Pluto, fire. And if I just put that into a diagram, what we get is that. Now, I fully accept that this card could appear over here just as much as this one does. They're so close, they're sort of vibrating with each other. But I think I've seen quite a bit of the High Priestess as an energy, based also on Ray 2, which is important. And so I left this one in, standing as it does for initiation. And again, by meditating on the relationships between these cards, I think I can come to understand a good deal about where the moon is and what it's saying in my horoscope. You've also got, I'll just mention a couple of things very, very briefly. The concept, I've taken this from Vedic astrology. Sun planets are more friendly, get on better with others. This gets back to similar aspects. That's something that Rosicrucians would look at, but I haven't bothered with it in this particular talk. And finally, there's a map of the individual planets on the different Sephiroth of the Tree of Life, which we use if we're thinking about the numerology aspect of it. Thank you very much. I hope some of you have found something of interest in our little talk. Feel free to unmute yourselves and we'll see where we go from there. And we lost the... Better get our sound back. Yes. What's happened there? I did. Stop the spotlight, isn't it?
Stop the slideshow.
Where? Don't understand. It's that one there, is it?
Yeah, close that. Oh. Have they all gone to sleep?
I think they have.
Ted's there.
Ted's awake by the look of it.
Yes, are you inviting questions or observations?
Yes, please. Any comments? I'll do my best. I've probably captured a large goose on this one, but
Shall I? Can I fire away with a couple of observations? Really?
please do.
Going back, interestingly enough, to your two charts of tropical and sidereal,
Yep.
and it's not something we use in esoteric astrology, but I'd like to make a comment about it anyway. I noticed that your north node moves from Capricorn in the tropical chart to Sagittarius in the sidereal chart. And if we take the north node as where we're going, I looked at it and thought, well, there we have the north node in Sagittarius, mental expansion, philosophical ideas, abstract thought in the 11th house of the group. Isn't that Finian Heavy down to an absolute T? So that Rahu, or that north node, firing you off in that direction, showing the direction you're going in. And I thought that fits perfectly. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's something there with the nodes. Now, when I tackled Douglas Baker about the nodes, and I said we don't use them in esoteric astrology, he said they're the moon's nodes. And he said the moon isn't a sacred planet, something else you've discussed today. But as you said with those veil planets, the moon does veil Vulcan, which is a sacred planet. So actually, if you look, as I have been, courtesy of our dear friend Paul Barker at Leeds, looking into some aspects of Vedic astrology, we see how very much the nodes are Rahu and Ketu are very, very important in a huge range of things, not just karma. So where we're going, what we've done previously, and your south node, which is in the 5th house of the individual, indicates to me that you may have had many of these temple lifetimes where you've actually worked on yourself. You've worked hard on yourself and you've developed yourself. You know more about this than me. But now this life and maybe succeeding lives is much more group orientated.
I'm not going to argue with any of that. It makes what you've just said makes absolute sense to me. I'll tell you another one that's quite funny. I had my teacher was very into sort of what we'll call conventional tropical astrology. And she saw me as a physical being. And it was obvious that I have a problem with my feet. I have a terrible problem with my ankles. That's Pisces and Aquarius. But she said, what have you got in Capricorn? Because you've got a problem with your knees as well, haven't you? Which is true. And that's what I meant about them standing together. Because if you look at the difference between my sidereal chart and my tropical chart, it's similar to what you were saying. My ascendant actually moves into Capricorn, which moves from ankles to knees. Yeah. So actually, I've got both.
Yeah. I also think that Capricorn ascendant, and I'm clearly saying that the Vedic astrology is something very important to tell us as well, is very much to me you climbing the mountain, and it's a serious life of serious study, a degree of, well, quite a large degree of isolation and initiation. And to me, that's what your life is all about again. So I just...
That's all true, you see. That's one reason why I use me, because I don't mind if people are discussing me as long as I'm here. But,
so my view is that we should look at both Eastern and Western astrology, because they both give very valuable insights into different aspects. And as I say, thanks to Paul, I've been looking more at Vedic astrology and seeing in my own chart, just like you've said for your chart, how extra layers of meaning can be revealed. Could I just make a comment about your tarot card system? I must have about 5 or 6 packs, maybe a few more of tarot cards. I've not seen those cards before.
They're relatively new.
Right.
They're now called the Golden Dawn Temple tarot cards.
Right, because I'd like to make 2 comments and say, first of all, I think that the colours were remarkable, even if not the colour on the outside, which did fit most of the 7 rays. There was certainly a very good correspondence of ray colouring, more so than other tarot packs, I would imagine, in the way you discussed the 7 rays. But very interestingly, when you moved on to going down and you had the virtue and the cosmic scenario, how many times have I read in Bailey that the evil that is around this planet cannot be dealt with by love? It has to be a higher power, and it has to be the first ray of will and power that is going to disperse the evil that is accumulated in and around the planet. And that was exactly your scenario of moving down when you got to the cosmic scenario using the first ray. So as well as all the correspondences you pointed out in a many-dimensional talk, I just wanted to say that one, I think, is a very important one for us to understand. We can't love away the evil on this planet. We have to take more direct action.
That's a very interesting point. Thank you for that. See, that's the wonderful thing about these things. You start off in one direction, and then it sort of loops round a bit, and you end up dealing with something else that's just as relevant. But I hope some of you got something out of that. I know the working out of the transfer of a horoscope into a line of tarot cards isn't easy. And it helps me, as I say, as a meditational tool. What are the energies I'm dealing with in these tarot cards? If I see them in terms of color and what have you, I can begin to make sense of it, because I tend to work with symbols. I don't work very well with mathematical abstractions. You are perfectly right if you're saying, yes, but he didn't say anything about aspects, because I think they're just as important as you do in astrology. I just wasn't dealing with that. I was dealing with a more ray 4 aesthetic, symbolic side of it, because I think that sometimes helps us, because I have to still work with what they call cookbook astrology. I have to look things up and sort of say, what does that mean? What does this mean? And sometimes you get contradictions.
Yeah, you do.
Where different people stress different things. And to me, it just helped to look at it from a symbolic perspective. And I worked out that way of doing it. I haven't seen it in a book as such anywhere, although Paul Foster Case in some of his writings uses similar ideas, but he doesn't apply it to astrology as I understand it.
What's your view then on the original? Because I have a Golden Dawn tarot deck, which I don't think is as vivid or as...
No, it's probably the one that was done by Robert Wang.
It is Robert Wang,
Yeah.
yeah.
You see, that's sort of a historical document, because some of the original order ones, there's copies of them around that were owned by members. The interesting thing is the modern people started saying, well, we've got a list of the names of the pigments that they used in 1888, because they sort of said the yellow for this was called that, and the yellow for that was called saffron, and the blue for this was called something else. That didn't help them know what color it was.
Wow.
And the big problem was that if you look at the Rider-Waite decks, particularly the original version, they're very medieval woodcut, because in 1910 they didn't have an appropriate purple ink. The dye didn't exist. They hadn't chemically invented it yet. That's why the Crowley Tarot, the Throth Tarot in 1944, is much more vivid, because they had a much wider range of dyes.
Right. Yeah.
And what happened was, this is Harry's own research, because he's a friend of mine. I was actually on the committee that was involved with the beginning of those tarot cards, but I didn't see the whole program through. He actually had to go back to scratch as an artist. And so I've got to work out and meditate about these colors till I see what fits, because I know what the color, I know what the books on coloration that's in the Golden Dawn Rosicrucian teachings say, but I've got to make them work on a painting. And so something that we thought first of all would take a few weeks actually took 7 years of hard work and meditation to produce those cards, one by one, blow by blow. He had guidelines in writing, but he wanted to make them work. And that's what he did.
Right.
But as I say, they are around. Sally, would you type in Wendrich Art House for me? I'm going to get Sally to put it in the comments, because if you look them up, they are available from there. It's WND RICH Art House. .com, you can put .com in as well. So, yeah. Yeah, that'll be. WendrichArtHouse.com. That's Harry and Nicola who designed those cards. They've got their website. You can purchase cards and books and other interesting stuff directly from them. They're actually cheaper if you get them direct from their website than they are on Amazon, surprisingly.
Thank you.
But if you're interested in a second look at some of those cards, that's where you'll get more information on them from. And it's easier to put them on there.
Can I just mention, I just bought the cards and the book that goes with them, and they both are actually a really interesting, the book is a really interesting read, because it explains all about the colours and how they were used and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I mean, the most amazing thing to me was to spend so long literally sitting down meditating about why is, what is, where is, how, card by card, step by step, blow by blow. And that's the difference that you picked up instantly, that you hadn't seen them. I mean, it's basically because Harry's a friend of mine and I really appreciate his work. I like to use them as a modern take on tarot cards when I'm giving these presentations, because I think the color from the Rosicrucian point of view is very important, and the amount of work that's been done with these is immense. Very similar in some ways to the Crowley cards. The only difference between the Crowley cards and the Golden Dawn ones is that Crowley absolutely clutters the cards with symbols. And I get sort of indigestional overdrive. I can't work with them very easily for meditational purposes. There's just too many different things jumping out at me. Very, very pretty, very, very well worked out. But these are slightly simpler in their layout and also slightly more modern.